Okay, we are going to get started with today's webinar on how to get the most out of TimeSolv. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. I'm Scott Clayson, Director of Marketing here at TimeSolv, and it is the second Wednesday of the month, which means it's time to learn about all the fun things that you can do in TimeSolv that you may not have known you could do, or you may have learned about them a long time ago, but we know how it is. If you don't use a muscle or a tool, you end up forgetting about how to use it or what to do. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Good afternoon to those on the East Coast. Good morning to those if you're sitting out on the West Coast, and hopefully you're joining me for lunch here if you're in the Central Time Zone where I'm at in Minneapolis, where it is drizzly raining, but at least not snowing right now. So I'm happy about that. We're going to take about 45 minutes to an hour roughly, and we'll be going through the various tip of the weeks that we send out. Generally on Monday afternoons, every Monday we send out a tip of the week, and we just aggregate those into our 4 or 5 bullet points of things we're going to go over here on these webinars. I am recording this, so I will send a link after the webinar so that you can review this at your leisure, or if you need to leave early, you'll have that link sent so that you could go back and hook in on the parts that you may have missed. Everyone who is attending the webinar is on mute, and we do have a question and answer period that we'll do at the end of the webinar. You should see on your screen as you're viewing this webinar a Q&A button. I believe it should be in the bottom part of the window where you're viewing the webinar. That's the place where you can ask questions. I just ask that we, as always, that we do this at the end of the webinars, because oftentimes the question you may have, I might answer 30 seconds later or a minute later or whatever it might be. So it's best just to do that at the end. So that's kind of the program of how we'll be running this. And let's take a look at our agenda for the day. So we have we're going to cover 5 different things within TimeSolv that I'm really excited to show you about. The first 2 are brand spanking new. They literally were just released last night, and pretty excited about these new features that we've put into place for your TimeSolv account, and wanted to bump them to the top of the list here. So the first thing we're going to show you, we've drastically improved the way that you can send fixed fee invoices, and specifically how you can set up a schedule to send fixed fee invoices out to your clients. And we'll go through kind of the before and after of how you used to be able to do it in TimeSolv and how we upgraded it. The second thing is, for those of you that attended last month's webinar, I showed everyone how on the draft invoices, there was now a place where you could check a box saying that the review has been completed. Well, we've now grown that even more, where you can set up in the defaults that no invoices can be sent until you check that box that says review has been completed. So I'll show you about where we can do that. And then some other sort of under the radar news in a release that came out, I think back in January, is you now have the ability to generate many, many, many more draft invoices at any one time than you used to be able to do. We cleared some technical hurdles that allow you to really generate draft invoices, as many as your heart's content. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the last 2 are kind of just some basic things that you may or may not be aware of. Most of you probably already have your Invoice Narratives set up, but I'm going to walk you through, if you're not aware, where you can set those up as the default, and the various opportunities you have to customize those for your clients or your matters, or for specific invoices. And then the last topic that we're going to cover is if you need to set up a tax for clients, or if you need to set up an admin fee that's perhaps going to be for every one of your customers or clients. We'll show you how to do that if you don't have that in place. And there's a couple other variables that we have with how you can apply taxes or admin fees to an invoice. So that kind of covers the agenda for the day. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the fun new feature of how to schedule your invoices for fixed fees. So you're going to be using the the milestone billing feature that we have already in place. And I'm going to talk about how it's already turned on by default and how you can generate draft invoices from milestones that you've created when they meet certain criteria. Okay, so let's get right into the app and I'll show you how this is going to behave. So I am logged in here. Now, previously, if you wanted to create a fixed fee invoice, there were several options. You could just create a time entry. Let's just choose client F here. Actually, that's not a good one because let's see, client. There we go. We could just enter a fixed amount here and just say, you know, $5,000, 50, or if I could type, $5,000. You could put a description in, not do any hours, and save it in new, put it in an invoice and ship it out. And that's still a really nice, fast and easy way to send out a fixed amount to a client. Let's just create it here at the time entry screen. The other way that we had in place, and we still have in place, is if you were to, let's choose matter B here, client A. And you had set in your invoice settings that you were going to do milestone billing here, okay? And then you could come into your matter plan tab and you could create a milestone here and you could determine that it's going to be a billable milestone and give it an amount. And so you could say this is March billing and the invoice amount is going to be $5,000, and you could put in the description here as well. And you hit save. Now, before this release that happened last night, the only way that the invoice would be generated for this matter and this milestone is you had to specifically come into this client and this matter and click this link here, complete and generate invoice. And we heard from many of you over time that, hey, look, I have 30, 40, 50 clients that I'm sending invoices to every month, and I have this specialized set of maybe 10 that I do fixed fees for. And I don't want to have to remember which are those specific 10 clients or 10 matters that I need to come in here and generate complete and generate invoice. I want to just be able to do it when I create all my drafts like I normally do. So we've now fixed that problem, or that extra leg of work that you'd have to do to generate a billable milestone. First, let me show you where you can turn that on and off by default. So if you go into your clients and settings and you go into your invoice settings, as of today, when you log in, you're going to see a new row here right underneath default invoice settings that says automatically complete milestone and generate invoices. That will already be turned on for you in your TimeSolv account. So if you're someone who already is using billable milestones, that's already going to be turned on now for you. So that's an important distinction for everyone to know. So this is already turned on and already available to everybody. So what we want to do is, let me just go ahead and create a whole new client and matter. And I'm going to call this our March 2019 webinar. Now, I'm also going to create the matter here. So let's go on matter. New matter, and it's the March 2019 webinar matter. And you can see I'm getting very creative in my names. Now when I'm in this matter, and I decide, I know for this matter, I'm going to be doing a set schedule of bills that I'm going to do on a monthly basis. So I'm going to go under invoice settings here, and I'm going to say I'm going to be doing a fixed fee, time and expense. Now you can see as soon as you check you're going to do fixed fee, you see again this automatically complete milestone generate invoices prompt. It's going to be turned on automatically because that's how it is in your default settings now. You can turn it off if you'd like to do milestone billing in another fashion, but it's turned on for you automatically. I'm going to hit save down here. Now I'm going to go into my matter plan. I'm going to create a new milestone, and let's call this March billing. The key here is the date that you enter. Now, by default, when you create these, it's going to have today's date. It's a billable milestone. Yes, I know I'm going to do $5,000, let's say. I'm going to hit save and new, and let's do April billing. Again, the key thing is the date. Let's put this into April at some point. Let's say April 13th. $5,000, save and new. Then we're going to do May billing. Same thing now. I'm going to put the date as sometime in May, say May 13th, just for the sake of consistency, $5,000 and so on. Whoops. Now I can build out, say, a year's worth of billing milestones. And here's the kind of the nice thing, if you're going to be doing this over and over again, is you could save this matter plan, if you will, as a template, so that the next time that you are, for the next client and the next matter that you're going to be doing the same thing with, instead of having to, again, create all of these billable milestones, you would just create it from a template. And they would all come up here, and then you could just change the dates around a bit. And obviously the amount, if that's going to change as well. So now I have a $5,000, March billable milestone that can go out. And I could generate the invoice right here, but I don't want to have to do that. I'm going to go about and just do my regular stuff that I do in the life of TimeSolv and my work. I'm going to make some time entries against this particular matter. So this is the March 2019 webinar matter. I'm going to put in 3 hours worth of work. I'm going to put in a bunch of information on the description. I'm going to do a save and duplicate. I'm going to move it over to today. I'm going to say I did 5 hours here. I'm going to delete this, and I can't remember the abbreviation. So I come over here to my little cheat sheet. I'm going to do that and so on. So now I have, a couple of time entries, for this time period and so on. Now it's the end of March. I'm ready to do my invoicing. I'm going to create all my draft invoices. So I come in over here to invoices and drafts, create my new draft invoices. My date range is March 1st to March 13th. Now in this case, I'm just, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to choose the one client, the March 2019 webinar client. I hit create. And now you see I have my $5,000 fixed fee invoice that I created right from the regular draft invoice page. I can download it quickly and take a look at it. Let's open it up. Here it has my time details, my 3 hours worth of work that I did on the 11th, my 5 hours worth of work I did on the 12th. That has the fixed fee amount of $5,000. It generated the one invoice because I had the date range of today, March 1st through March 13th. If I wanted to do a new draft invoice for, let's say we wanted to do the April one already, the key here is I would put the date range. I'm not even sure if TimeSolv allows me to do this in the future. I've never actually tried this before. So let's see. If I do April 1st through April 30th, there's my new draft invoice. That's for April. And again, I could download it. I could open it up here in the preview window. Oh, let's just download it. And again, it's my fixed fee invoice. I don't have any time and expenses in that time period, the April time period. That's why you don't see anything here. But you can see that I've now created, and if I go back to the matter plan and I go to the tab here, it's going to show I've completed those two billable milestones, and I generated from the draft invoice page. So now you can set up your schedule of your recurring invoice. You could do this as a quarterly time period, whatever it might be. You just create these new milestones. You put in the dates that you want those invoices to be generated. That's the key factor here. Name it whatever you want to name it. Even save it as a template then to reapply it to new matters. And when you go to create all your drafts, in the normal fashion under invoices and drafts, it's going to pull those invoices for you. So we're really happy to be able to present this to everybody, and I hope everyone can get a lot of use out of it. I'm hoping, and I've talked to the dev team already, and we'll see what kind of response there are. I would love to be able to set up at even next step is when you create these billable milestones, set it right here as recurring and put a schedule of how often you want it to recur and so on. Something we'll think about down the road as people become more adaptive to this, but very happy to have this feature in place now in creating your fixed fee invoices, and more importantly, creating them in a much easier and faster way where you usually create your draft invoices. So that is tip number one. for the day. So let's talk about the next tip, which I believe was we're going to be talking about the capability to require that the review completed on a draft invoice be checked before you could send out an invoice. So let's again go back into TimeSolv here and show you where you can set that up as a default. You just want to go under your invoices to settings. Well, first of all, let me review for everyone who wasn't here on last month's webinar. So we added a new feature, as most of you should already know, when you have your draft invoices in place, if you need to do any edits to this invoice, you simply click on the dollar amount right here. So when we click on it, this allows you to do all sorts of things. You can change the dates, you can change the template, you can change the delivery method, time and expenses and so on can be modified. You can apply discounts, adjustments, whatever it might be. This is a fixed fee one that I would just create, so I don't have that ability here. But more importantly, we added back in January this little row here, review completed, where you can check that box, hit save, and now when you go back to your list of invoices, the status will change to a check mark. Now remember, we have 3 different status types. Well, I guess in some ways we have 4. Status right here of nothing means this invoice has not been viewed, seen, nothing. It essentially is just here in this row. If you click on the dollar amount here and you just simply view things, you're not doing anything, you're just looking. No changes have been made. Now I go back and you can see that we now have the little eye icon, which means we have viewed the invoice. If you do make an edit, let's say we change this to say 15, whatever it might be, and I hit save. Now we have this little pencil icon. And again, when you hover over any of these icons, you're going to see what it means. So now we can see that this invoice has been edited. And the checkbox then means, as I showed you before, that you've checked the box that review has been completed. So what do we want to do if we want to make this a requirement? Now we have a requirement where you can set in time entries and expense entries to be approved by somebody before they ever make it to this point. We have that in place already, and we've covered that in other webinars. Now we have it where you created the draft invoices and they can't be sent until the review has been completed. So you go under invoices and settings, and it's simply under the general tab, 4th line down, review required to send invoices. Check that, hit save. When I go back to my invoices now, and I have these 2 drafts, one has the review's been completed, one it hasn't, and we go to send these. Notice that it's telling me this one invoice sent successfully, one invoice was not sent due to errors. Well, what is the errors? For those of you that may have run into this in the past, if an invoice isn't sent and there are errors, you're going to see this little yellow warning triangle. Hover over that, and it's going to tell you essentially what the problem is. In this case, the invoice review is required to send. So again, this is another level of approval process, if you will, that you can have in place. Now, it's important to understand who can make these edits and check the box that says review completed, because you want to limit that, obviously. So to double check who can and cannot do this review completed, you want to check on your professionals. So go under account to professionals. You want to click on one of the particular professionals you want to review. You go to their permissions tab, and under invoices here, you can see if they have no access or view only, they will not be able to do the review completed. We would highly recommend, best practices from TimeSolv, that you limit anybody who shouldn't have anything to do with invoicing. You should limit them to just being able to view invoices or just not even have any access at all. If you choose to make one of your timekeepers or one of your support people view edit, create, or all access, they will be able to check that box, go in and hit review completed and save it. Okay. So the difference between these 3, view and edit, is obviously, as you can see, they can't create an invoice and they can't send an invoice. View, edit, create, just like it sounds, they can do all of those 3 things that cannot send an invoice. Then all access are for those, only for the people who can actually send the invoice. So those are the differences there. So just make sure you have a permission set. Then you'll be able to know, when that review is completed, there's only a limited number of people who can check that box. to approve the invoices and have them sent out. Again, another layer of making sure that the people who have to see the invoices before they go out, see them, approve them, check that box. Now you can send them on their way and we're all happy, healthy, and getting money returned to us. Okay, so let's talk about our next tip. And again, this ability to do this invoice and settings just came online last night. You know, so you will see that if you have not logged into TimeSolv yet today, the next time you log in, you will see, and you go to invoice settings, you're going to see this new added feature. All right, so let's talk about generating the invoices. And by generating them, I mean at a mass level. We used to have previously limitations where essentially you were limited to creating about 500 invoices at any one time. And part of that was an issue with talking to the servers and it takes a long time, obviously, to generate those invoices. And once it hit a certain time limit, I believe the threshold was like 90 seconds, I'm not 100% sure, then it would, you know, essentially time out. So we limited it to 500 invoices that you could generate at any one point in time. We have since done some, I don't know what the dev team did in the background. They you know, waved their magic wand, did their stuff. And now you could generate literally thousands of invoices at any one time. I talked to one of our developers earlier today when he was testing this. And again, we rolled this out back in February, kind of under the radar to make sure it was working properly. When he was testing, he generated 3,500 invoices at once. Now, it took some time to do that. I think he said it took over a half hour for that to actually, for them to be created. But you were able to create, he said 3,500 is what he did. There's no limit, really. That's just the number he chose. And more importantly, because it is going to take time to generate thousands and thousands of invoices, we did create the ability to navigate away from that draft screen while the invoices are being created. Now, you may have noticed in TimeSolv, and this is part of that additional feature, is when you create your drafts now, and I'm going to create a whole bunch of drafts at once. So I'm going to do all my clients in the whole data, and I have a bunch I know they're going to be created. If you notice, it says 0 invoices processed. Now this number is going to start changing and will periodically update. Now we're at 13. Now we're at, and you know what? Guess what? You can navigate away from this. Oh, an error has occurred, 44 draft invoices. Okay, I'm not sure what the error was, but 44 were created. If it was still churning and creating like 100, 200, 300, you could close out that window and continue to navigate around TimeSolv and do things within TimeSolv, and then eventually come back to your invoice draft screen and have all your draft invoices. Oh, I have some error. Oh, this is the one that I was trying to send that had the invoice review, and I've now since turned that off, that ability. So that's why I got that error. So the point is, and this may not obviously be applicable to all of you, but if you're a firm who has a high volume of invoices you're creating every month or every time you do your invoicing, you will not be limited in that number. It will take time, obviously, to generate all of those if you have a very high volume number, but you will be able to still work within TimeSolv while those are being generated in the background. So we're really happy to kind of free up that log jam of creating, you know, multiple hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of invoices at once. Okay, blowing through these tips quickly. Let's talk about something that a lot of you probably set up back when you first signed on with TimeSolv and you got trained by our wonderful success managers and support team, but you maybe haven't touched or looked at since then. Or maybe if you kind of did some self-serve onboarding and didn't have a session with one of our success managers, you maybe haven't gotten this into place exactly the way you want it. So let's talk about invoice narratives and what's it going to actually, where you change the copy that will appear in various sections of the invoice. So if you head under Clients to Settings and come back to this Invoice Settings tab, the same place where we saw the default, you know, automatically complete milestone and generate invoices, there is at the bottom of this page all of your default invoice narratives. And we have several, obviously. We have a cover page narrative, what's going to be on the main page, if you will, the footer of every page, what's going to be in the email message, and this is important for all of you that send out your invoices via email, what's going to be in the body of the email when your clients receive the email. Same thing when you send out statements, what's going to be the message, and then any payment instructions. So where does this all appear? So your cover page narrative, as you can see, says here's the following invoice, blah, 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 please pay using ACH. If I look at an invoice here and I choose in my flexible billing template to include a cover page, that text is going to appear right here, as you can see. And that's going to be basically all that appears on that cover page, other than things you may have designated in your billing template. The sort of generic, if you will, invoice narrative, if you choose not to have a cover page, you can insert a narrative right here, as you can see. If you don't have a cover page narrative, blah, blah, blah. This will be right below what essentially the RE of the invoice is. You can always edit this. I should note too, this payment terms, net 30, you can also modify that. You may have noticed right up here, when you define your payment terms, you can change this text if you'd like. By default, it's going to just say what you have here for payment terms, but that can be edited. And as you can see, it appears right above the RE for the invoice. The footer is going to be on every single page of the invoice. If you notice, it's going to be very small down here. We appreciate your business. We appreciate your business, and so on. Okay. And by default, it's centered in the middle of the page. The invoice email message is fairly obvious what you can do here. Just so you know, this will automatically be turned into links if you use an HTTP. You want to insert a web page or a place to go, for submitting payment. If you don't have LawPay set up with our client portal, just put in the web address as you see it here, including the HTTP, and the email clients themselves will automatically turn those into links. And then the payment instructions will specifically appear on your remittance page that you have. So I'm here on the remittance page, and it says, these are the payment instructions that appear. So that whatever you put as your default down here, you don't have to put anything, will appear at the bottom of the remittance page, just so you're aware. That's where it's going to appear on the invoice. So this is where the defaults are. And again, you don't have to, I don't have anything set up right now for my email message when I send statements. If you don't want a footer, you don't have to have a footer, but this is where you would just have those all in place. So now we have 3 places where you can modify this, customize this as you need to. The first place is at our client level. So let's go to that March webinar that we created. If I click on this client, I go under Invoice Settings. Here's my default Invoice Narratives. Simply click Edit, and now I can edit it. And any invoice I send out for this specific client will have this narrative instead of what you have set by default. You can get one level more granular by going to Matters. I'm going to click on the matter here. Same thing. Invoice Settings. Down at the bottom of the screen, edit the narrative. So if this only for this one matter for this client, if you change things here, it will appear on that invoice for that matter. So we're doing the next level of granularity. Now, if for whatever reason, you have to change the narrative for a client and matter, but you forgot to do it, or you want to do it, the next place and your last chance basically to edit the invoice narrative is from the draft screen itself. You may have seen that already when we were looking at drafts. So as we're, we click on any one of these here, let's just choose this particular client and matter. You can go under narratives here, and this is essentially your last chance to make those edits if you want to do it at the invoice level. The nice thing about this is that if you decide to change it here, it's only going to change it for this one invoice, for this one matter, for this one client. If, next time you create your draft invoice for this matter, it's going to go right back to whatever the defaults were set back over at the matter level, client level, or just your default settings. So there is a lot of flexibility, frankly, I think, in how you can manipulate what you want to say on the invoices. And I do know, and we do know that, if you're sending out, again, hundreds of invoices a month, 3 or 4 dozen a month, the idea of customizing these is not great, not something that sounds super fun to do. I would suggest perhaps if you did, if it's really important to you to customize what's on the invoice for each of your clients and matters, is when you set up those clients and matters, as you're creating them for the first time in TimeSolv, that's a good opportunity to come in here and modify those narratives so that you can say, hi, Jane, thank you so much for your business. Here's your invoice. Looking forward, whatever kind of the message is going to be, but you can personalize it a bit. Again, that's something that you're setting up your client and lots of things for the first time anyway. Why not create sort of a custom message for that client? And so now every single invoice you send for that specific client will have that unique message. And again, you could do that at the matter level as well, obviously. So that is I think a nice way to personalize it without personalizing it, if you will. You only do it once at the beginning, and then it'll automatically flow that through to the invoices as you do continual work for that client. If you need to customize it at the invoice level, you saw how you can do that. So, so that is how we do the invoice narratives. Let's talk about our last tip. And that is if you have to set up a tax or set up an admin fee. I know that there are a lot of firms that may just charge a 2-3% admin overhead on top of their invoices. That's not part of their regular billable rate. Or if there are, depending on your states and jurisdiction and the type of work you're doing, I mean, and if you're using TimeSolv Pro, not TimeSolv Legal, and so maybe you're selling a retail thing, whatever it might be, if you have to add a tax to your clients and matters, you can do that again. I'll show you how you can do it globally. You can also then do it at the specific client level as well. And then the other thing is that you can actually set up that a specific task can be taxed. So again, as you're doing your time entries and you choose a particular task code that you may have set up, or maybe you're using one of the ones that already exist, you can say this task code only is taxable. And again, so that allows a lot of flexibility depending on how you may need to apply the tax. So let's talk about where we set this all up and how you can do this on both. I should back up too. You can do this on both time entries and expense entries. You can apply a tax. You can apply it to just one or just the other. And I'll show you how you can modify that. So first of all, let's talk about the label that you want to appear on the invoice that designates this additional fee, if you will, that you're going to be adding to your invoices. That's the first step. So if you go into your account to settings, the third label down by default is going to say tax label, because that's how it comes out of the box with TimeSolv. But you can change that label here to whatever you want to say. Like perhaps I'm going to call this, a 6% sales tax. And then you have to put in an ID number perhaps, or whatever it might be. You can change that here. But as soon as I hit save, you're going to notice that that label changes here over here on this side. And now throughout the rest of TimeSolv's, the various places where you'll interact with this fee, you'll see it called 6% sales tax or whatever you need it to be called. This is also the label that will actually appear on the invoice, which is why I would recommend that, so it's clear if you do have an admin fee, unless you put in the description of the admin fee in your invoice narrative, it probably doesn't hurt to put down how much you're actually charging for this additional fee or tax, because again, it'll appear right on the invoice, and I'll show you how you do that or how it looks here in just a minute. So now we have 6% sales tax set up as the label. Now we can say, I want to turn it on for time entries and expense entries. So we go under first time entries to settings. And that's where you can determine what the actual rate is going to be for your time entries. So again, as we're doing this, if you want the label to be, maybe it's not going to be a percent, it's just going to be admin fee, but you charge 6% admin fees on your time entries, but expense entries, you charge 3%, whatever it might be. You can change that, and I'll show you here in a second. But here's where you're going to put in the actual percentage. In this case, I'm going to say 6% because that's what we're setting this up as. I'm going to hit save. Same thing with expense entries. I'm going to go under expense, settings. Again, expense tax rate. Again, you can put in 6%, whatever it might be, hit save. Now, how do we apply this to specific matters? First of all, let's set up our defaults. If you go under your clients and matters, excuse me, on your clients to settings, you'll have what's going to be the taxable status as you're creating all your clients and matters. You can choose, you know, one of three things. Obviously not taxable, taxable, taxable by task. If I hit taxable here, say you already have 15, 20, 30 clients in TimeSolv, just because you change the status here in the default area, we do not retroactively apply that to already existing matters. And I've gone over this several times with our Wednesday webinars, in that most of the time, almost there's very few or rare occurrences I can't even think of right now, where if you change the default settings, it's not going to update existing clients and matters. It will only take on these default settings for new and future, obviously, clients and matters. So that's an important thing to understand when you change these settings. If you change them here, that doesn't mean it's just going to go back and change everything in time. So now I'm going to change my to taxable as the status. I'm going to hit save. So let's go to that client and matter that we created today. We do this at the client level. If you notice, I created this client, what, a half hour ago? Their taxable status has no status whatsoever. It's not taxable, even though that's the default. An example of what I just described. So I'm going to make this taxable. Now, when I do hit taxable, you can see I have a couple of things that appear. It's showing me that I have a 6% sales tax rate on time entries, 6% on expense entries. We give you the flexibility to override this if you need to. Just check those boxes, update the numbers. So you have that ability to do that as well. So you can get very specific. Now, applying this tax rate applies to all matters. You don't have the flexibility. We don't allow you to do it specifically at the matter level to set a different taxable rate or turn off the taxable rate or whatever it might be. You only do it at the client level, okay? Now, let's talk about if you want to create a tax specifically for a specific task code. You would turn that on by going under your time and settings, which is where you're going to find all of your task codes. It might be called activity codes for you as well. And here you can see I'm using TimeSolv Legal, so I have all the built-in ABA task codes. If I want to have a code be taxable, then I could simply click on it over here on the left and say, yeah, it's taxable, and hit save. Now, when I create a time entry and I apply this specific code, it's going to apply a tax just for the work done with that task code applied. So if I did, you know, if my billable rate's 250, not everything else, if I don't have taxable turned on, or if I overrode it or whatever it might be, okay? So it's, again, you can get very granular with this and how you apply these fees. So let's see how that kind of works in action. So I'm going to do a time entry here. Let's go back to, well, now that we've turned it on for, let me double check that for my March 2019 webinar. Yep, I got it turned on as taxable. I have time, I'm going to remove the, okay, so we've already completed those invoices. I'm going to actually just remove these just to get them out of the way. I can't because I've already generated a draft invoice. Let's see if I can back this out. If I can't, I'll just create a whole nother draft invoice. Or excuse me, a whole nother matter, just for the sake of clarity. Okay, what am I doing here now? Oh yes, I'm trying to put in my matter plan. I'm going to try to delete this. It's still not letting me. Okay, well, that's fine. Let's just show you how the tax can get applied even to these. We already have, this has been billed already. So I'm going to actually just create it for, let's do this. Let's just create a whole nother matter just to make it easier. So time entry for matter 2. Okay, so we're at March webinar. Oh, no, the other one, the matter 2. That's all right. Let's create a draft invoice for March webinar matter 2. So you can see I have a very specific amount here because I have my time entry was 200, $1,650, but my total, I had $99 worth of sales tax here. So now when I download the PDF, it's going to show me that I have again, this is the label that appears 6% sales tax here. So again, that's why it's important to determine how you want to name your tax or admin fee or whatever it might be, and it's going to appear here, okay? So that's how you would apply and use your this ability to add a fee, a tax, whatever the case may be, and how you can turn it on or off at the specific client level. Can't do it at the matter level, only at the client level, okay? Okay, we're done just a little bit early. I blew through those actually faster than I thought we might. I would love to take some questions now from anybody who had something come up. They're kind of scratching their head. Please feel free to ask me any and all questions, and I'll be happy to help you. Well, nothing has come in quite yet to our Q&A section, so I'll wait, do a little tap dance for everyone here. I guess no questions means I must have explained everything thoroughly enough. So again, if you ever have any questions on anything in TimeSolv, you do have, and I do love to remind everybody of this, you can always send an email to support@timesolv.com. You can call our 1-800 number. You can see it's 715-1284. We also have, you have a success manager who is assigned to you. You can always reach out to your success manager and they will answer any questions for you. You can always book a support session as well. If you go to our, website, go under resources here to support. And then you can always schedule an online meeting here. You just click on that and it will allow you to choose, a time and date for a support session, a 30-minute support session by default. And you just put in your topic of what you'd like to discuss and they'll meet you on our, on a Zoom meeting, just like this webinar is being run on Zoom, and be able to answer any and all questions or help that you might need. We want to make sure you guys are all successful in what you're doing with TimeSolv. So please, we are like to consider ourselves an open book and we'll help you in any way possible. So unless anyone has any other questions, I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. We will then send you a recording as soon as this processes and I can get it uploaded to our YouTube channel. I forgot to mention as well that we will have it on our YouTube channel that we, if you haven't subscribed to that, you should, and you can watch this then whenever you'd like. So I thank everyone for joining me here today, and we will see you next month. Looks like Wednesday, April 8th will be the next Wednesday webinar, a little early because April 1st is on the first Wednesday there. So everyone have a great rest of March, and we'll see you a month from now. Take care, everybody.